story you are about to hear is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
How do you follow something like that? Good grief. Oh, that's wonderful. As a matter of fact, I did spend 20 years in battling organized crime. I was in the U.S. Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, Intelligence Division. Now that's a mouthful in itself. And in the Organized Crime Division. Now, I was in that 1950 to 1970. And in those years, I never really realized what organized crime was, and yet I was involved in it. Now, just the other day, getting ready for this little chat, I went to the dictionary and looked up organized crime. What is it? And it says, organized crime, a secret terrorist society and a secret criminal organization to control illicit activities throughout the world. Now that's in the dictionary. And here I was in it in the years 1950 to 1970 and working in the organized crime division, and I never knew what it was. I'm just going to pass this around, share it with people. That was taken right out of the dictionary. Now, in the early days, before my time, Eliot Ness and Al Capone, I think most of you remember the name Al Capone. We're looking back into the 1930s, and Al Capone was convicted of income tax evasion. Now, moving forward into later years, the 1950, 1970 years, Mickey Cohen. I don't know how many of you recognize that name, but Mickey Cohen was a hoodlum in the Hollywood, Beverly Hills area. And in fact, I have a book here, which I'll pass around. You can scan it. This was written by Mickey Cohen, and it's a very interesting story. But the reason I brought it is because we'll say the picture on the front and his background, and it was very interesting. He was a good friend of, let's see, I can't remember that guy's name now. Just skips me, but I'll come back to it. Anyway, the guy was shot right through the head because he had brought mob money to Las Vegas, and they opened the Flamingo Hotel. Most of you know where the Flamingo is. Bugsy Siegel, thank you very much. Bugsy and Mickey were good friends, and Bugsy got shot right through the head because as he opened the Flamingo Hotel and the money kept rolling in, he skimmed off the top. Now that didn't make the mob very happy, and so they managed to do him in. I'm going to pass this book around. People can glance at it, look at it, and that sort of thing. But that's just one of the incidents. This is a picture, and I'll pass that around the other way. That's the type of badge that I wore, not outwardly, but carried, and that's a retirement badge, I do believe. I'm going to pass around another little picture, and this is a sterling silver miniature battering ram. And here's another picture, Mickey Cohen, again, out of the book. Now, Mickey, we arrested Mickey and searched his premises one day. We convicted him of income tax evasion. And the arrest afforded us an opportunity to search his apartment, his residence, and so we did. Well, he had a little puppy dog named Mickey Jr. Now, Mickey Jr. came up to my leg and smelled my dog. Now, would you believe Mickey Jr. peed on my shoe? Now, that story, believe it or not, traveled throughout the chain of command all over the United States. Everybody knew that Cal had been peed on by Mickey Cohen's dog. So that was really kind of interesting. Just the other day in the newspaper. Now, it's interesting because I brought the article. A friend of mine found it in the newspaper, and this was the first of the year. And Mickey had a girlfriend named Candy Barr. Now, I knew who she was, and she was a beautiful lady. She's a stripper by trade, and what a gorgeous body she had. Anyway, here's an article about Candy Barr that just appeared in the paper a couple months ago. We'll just pass that around and let people glance at it. It mentions Mickey Cohen also. So that's the kind of thing that keeps cropping up in my background. Now, we became targets of the hoodlums, and our own family was a target. My son, Alan, the school where he was going, and he was about age 12. I think it was junior high school, as I recall. Let me back up. The school received a phone call that said, "Send Alan Turner home. His dad's been shot." Well, they didn't inquire who the person was, so we will never know who made that phone call. But here was Alan trudging home, and a postman, friend of ours who was a scoutmaster, saw Alan. He says, "Alan, what are you doing out of school?" Well, Alan said the school got a call and said my dad had been shot and I was to go home. Well, the mailman said, "Let's not go in the house. Let's go see your mom." And she worked just down the street from where we lived. So he took Alan down to where she worked, and they related what had happened. Well, my boss received a phone call from Mary, my wife, who related what Alan had been told. And he says, "Well, that's the first I've heard of it." Now, I was out in a radio car in Beverly Hills and Hollywood area, and I got this call from my boss, and he says, "Cal, are you all right?" I says, "Yeah, I'm fine." Then he told me what had happened over the radio. And he says, "Why don't you go home so they can see that you're okay?" And I said, "All right, I'll do that." So we did. And by the way, while I'm talking on going home and radio cars, we did not use black and white red light and siren. In the Internal Revenue Service Code, there is a section that says if anything is used in violation of the Internal Revenue Code, it is subject to seizure. Well, that's how we got our fleet of cars. And as a matter of fact, one of my favorite cars was a 1953 Ford Thunderbird. You guys remember the T-Birds, the early years? Beautiful cars. This was a black one with red leather upholstery, and everybody knew that that's Cal's car. You don't drive that one, okay? Well, our fleet of cars, which looked like ordinary street cars, was in the subway terminal garage, and that's very close to the Federal Building in Los Angeles. So one day I went down to the garage and I couldn't find the car. "Where's our T-Bird?" I asked the attendant. He says, "Oh, a couple of your guys drove it out about an hour ago." I says, "Nobody's on the road today, so it is stolen," and it was stolen. We never recovered that car. So out of Los Angeles, I feel reasonably sure it went across the border and was over in Mexico somewhere. But they got even with us. They got their car back, or somebody got a car back. So our son Alan had a second episode. Now that first episode was when they were trying to kidnap him. Now that's how the mob gets back at the agents. And as a matter of fact, I just read a couple days ago in another state, the same incident occurred exactly the same way. An agent's son was called out of school and was kidnapped. So anyway, Alan went to court one day with Mary. I recommended that I think it's time you take my son, Alan, and let him see the type of work we do and how the courts handle it. Well, there was a case which was not ours. It was an FBI case, and it was underway in court. There were 5 of the Italian people on trial. And so I was sitting in court waiting for my wife and my son to arrive. Well, by golly, they didn't arrive. And I got kind of antsy. And so I got up and went out in the hall, and there they were, standing there. I says, "What are you doing out here? Come on in." And they said, "No, we can't, because there's a sign on the door that says no witnesses allowed." Well, I said, "Wait a minute, you're not witnesses, you're spectators. Witnesses are to testify, and they don't want witnesses ahead of time." So they had a special witness room where the witnesses were to wait. At any rate, so my son Alan and Mary walked into the courtroom with me. The United States attorney stopped his questioning of the witnesses and looked over, and he says, "Hi, Cal, is that your son?" Well, 5 guys, mafia guys, defendants, turned and looked like that, stared at Alan. Now, I've got an email here. I was making eye contact with Frankie Carbo, and that did it to me. He still gets a chill today. Now, he's 60 years old. And I told him I was going to mention this little story to the group, and he says, "Oh, Dad, I still get a chill every time I think of the look that Frankie Carbo gave me when we made eye contact as we walked into that courtroom." He says, "That really did it." And he still remembers that. And again, he's 60 years old. Okay. You'll have to pardon me because with my failing eyesight, I got problems. I can't even read my own notes. Okay, that's son Alan. All right. And car seizures. Very interesting on these car seizures because, as I said, the 53 Thunderbird was stolen right out from under us. And car seizures, I can remember one incident where we were going to arrest a gentleman that had just bought himself a new Cadillac. And so I had 5 of my agents, myself included, were out watching him wax his brand new Cadillac. And so the agents were all anxious to seize that Cadillac. We could just see Cal starting to drive a Cadillac instead of a 53 Thunderbird. Well, I stopped the guys. I said, wait, I don't want that car until it's fully waxed. So here we had these 5 guys all stationed around. They're all watching this character wax this beautiful new Cadillac. And finally, I said, when he puts the lid on the can, go get it. So that's exactly what we did. He stood back, put the lid on the can, admiring his car, and here come our guys. Boom. And okay. I read the list of names. We became extremely popular throughout the United States. The group I had, there were 5 of us, we became known as the Racket Squad. And it finally came out that we were being called to other states to help them make cases against the hoodlums, the bad guys. We call them the BBs, bad boys, and GGs, the good guys. So the BBs, the bad boys, in all states, they had groups that were, mainly it was in the gambling group, the bookmakers and narcotics and that sort of thing. So that's the type of gentleman that we worked against. And our racket squad became so popular that we were being called to other states all over the United States. And our boss in Los Angeles was a little unhappy with us because we were spending so much time on the road and in other states. And Los Angeles was just loaded with hoodlums and bad guys. So we had to kind of curtail our activities and not let other states and locations use our time. We worked with LAPD and the LA Sheriff's Office. Both of them have intelligence divisions. Both of them have racket squads. And we traded information back and forth. And quite often, they found that we would have an avenue that would take the load off of them. And so, as I said, we worked with LA Sheriff's Office, LAPD, frequently. And what a bunch of good guys they were. There's a story I should tell you. I don't know if you know the numbers racket. Does that mean anything to you? Okay. Numbers racket group. Now, this was a black Negro group in the black neighborhood. And the headquarters was on the 2nd floor, but they had guard dogs downstairs. And LAPD came up with this one. They said, that's not a problem. Don't worry about it. I said, well, what do you mean don't worry about it? The minute we start into that location, those dogs are going to bark and announce the bad guys are coming, meaning the good guys. So anyway, they said, not to worry. Well, what do you mean not to worry? Well, this is one of the little techniques they use. The night before we were going to go in, they went to the hamburger stand, they got a couple of hamburgers, loaded them with sleeping powder, gave them to the dogs. The dogs loved the hamburgers, and by the time it came for us to go in, the dogs were sound asleep, just barely open their eyes. Oh, hi guys, bung. So those are kind of the techniques that LAPD and LA Sheriff's Office taught us, and we utilized them, by golly. It was just great. Okay, and let's see. Oh, the ramrod. I passed around, I think it's going around now. Did they see that over here? Okay, there it is up here on the coat. I saved one. The incidents of hitting a door are kind of spooky. You don't know what's on the other side. Theoretically, you don't know what's on the other side. And our agents, who would be new to our group, our racket squad, were kind of nervous about hitting a door until I came up with this idea, and I had a jeweler make a lot of these silver ramrods, tie pins, and anytime a guy had occasion to hit a door with one of the ramrods, he was given one of these. And believe it or not, it took all the fear out of it. Everybody wanted to wear a ramrod, and it became a real status symbol. It's just one of those little techniques that a fellow uses in order to instill bravery in your agents, because they could just see that pin on their lapel. So it worked like a charm. Okay. And let's see. Oh, listening devices. Now, we never wiretapped. Now, you're hearing a lot currently, right now, today, about the authority to wiretap, listen in on other people's conversations with a wiretap. We never permitted wiretaps, ever. However, there were other techniques that were used, and this is one that I'm kind of proud of. You all know what cement blocks look like, and cement blocks are used in structures like this. Now, if there was an illegal activity going on in a building, we knew about it, but we couldn't get our intelligence, our information sufficient to get a search warrant. So in buildings that were built of cement block, we found that if we can rent a premises next door and we can drill a hole through that cement block but stop halfway. Now that halfway point is important. That's our halfway. If we went beyond that, that's their halfway. So without a warrant, we could go right in through the wall and stop at the halfway point. Now, we took this information to a federal judge in Los Angeles, Judge Ernest Tolan, and we brought in a cement block and we showed him what we wanted to do. And he kind of grinned, looked at me, and he says, "Perfectly all right, as long as you stay in your half of the airspace. Okay. So we did, and we even took a photograph of the installation, and of course it worked like a charm because we could hear everything that was going on next door, and that's what we wanted to do, to get our intelligence to put together a search warrant. So anyway, Judge Tolan was very much in favor of our team because we took the responsibility to do everything legally, and we did. And Judge Tolan, bless his heart, I was wearing a tie pin like this of a ramrod one day in court, and I was testifying in his court. And he stopped my testimony. He looked over, he says, "Mr. Turner?" I says, "Yes, sir." He says, "What is that?" I looked down at what he was looking at, which was this little pin. I says, "Yes, sir, that's a silver ramrod that I award to my agents." He says, "I thought so," and got a great big grin on his face. So he was very much in favor of our work, and he appreciated the fact that I would bring cases that were marginal to him, get his opinion, and he would then either authorize or would not authorize. So we never broke a law that I know of. My agents never broke a law. But they were successful, and like I said, so successful that we were called upon to go to other states and conduct investigations for them. Well, fellas, that's about all I have to report. Do you have any questions that I could answer?
It seemed like everything that come out on LA, that where they kind of were disassociated with the families of New York, the 5 families on the mafia.
That's true. Let's see, Detroit was a background, and one other city.
Milwaukee?
What?
Milwaukee, connected back east.
It was back east, and I can't remember exactly which town or city it was, but very well known. It's probably in my notes back at the office or back at the apartment. But anyway, a lot of the activity that came out to Los Angeles, Southern California, I'll put it that way, not just Los Angeles, but Southern California, originated in either Detroit or New York, and one other city.
Chicago, Florida.
Kansas City.
No.
And Kansas City was connected up there because Kansas City was the one that was getting skimming.
Okay.
Them and Detroit was getting most of the money off of casinos.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, any other comments or questions?
I had the best joke is the one where Frank Costello back in New York City was head of one of the primaries at that time. And one of the senators come up and he says, "What have you done for the United States?" And he sat there and thought and said, "I paid my taxes."
Oh,
Laughter all over.
you know, you mentioned that, brings to mind, if you are a hoodlum and you are receiving income from an illegal source, we'll say bookmaking, narcotics, sales, anything like that, are you going to report it on your tax return? Are you going to say the sale of so many pounds of narcotics or et cetera, et cetera? No, you're not. And you don't. Now, I don't say that this is a way to avoid it, but if you were a hoodlum And if you were receiving money, you could put it on your tax return like miscellaneous income and report it. But do you? No. You don't report anything. So that's how Internal Revenue Service Organized Crime Division got in the act, was due to the...
One of them was listed as a beer sale. The curious thing, he had a property that was worth about $2 million, and another one down on the beach is worth about half that. Everything else, but it seems like it come down to the point, he never sold one bottle of beer.
Yeah, one bottle of beer. Okay, any other comments or questions?
There was a group back in Kansas City that back in the 50s, they came into the downtown part of Kansas City, Missouri, and run a bunch of these BBs out.
Mm-hmm.
They fled to St. Joe, Missouri, and Pretty Boy Floyd, and I can't remember the names of some of the others, but they fled to St. Joe and they cornered them up there.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them, they were shot by their own people up there because they had tried to plead their way into being...
Oh, you bet.
Photographs is the big ones like Kansas City.
I don't know if you're your group or not, but run them up there. Just try to put the thing down.
Okay. Just a quick note here. I made a little memo to talk to you about it. Phone spots. Any of you that have ever had occasion to make a bet through the telephone to, we'll say, a bookmaking spot. Phone spots are kind of interesting because you, the player, the bettor, will have a telephone that you can call. Now that telephone usually is monitored, we'll say, by a girl, and she's taking a record of who's calling, and you have a code name, Blackie, and Blackie bet $500 on a race. And that information is recorded by the girl. Then a back office phone will periodically call the phone spot girl and take the phone action off of her. Then that's wiped off, and it's either wiped off with a wet rag on a slate, or if you know about flash paper. Anybody know about flash paper, what it is? It's paper like this that is impregnated with gunpowder, and a cigarette or a cigar burning next to it. Just touch the corner and it's gone like that. That's how you wipe it out. So if there's a raid occurring on a phone spot and they want to get rid of the evidence, gone, just that quick. And the bookmakers generally will honor any bettor that says, well, I called my bet in to your girl. And so they'll honor it, even if it's a winner to the player. So that's just one of the codes that they go by. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.